Hey, Wayne, thank you so much, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy spring. We're really excited to be giving this webinar today. Great to be talking about a topic other than Google, although, of course, Google will find its way in, as it always does. But to be talking about methods outside of Google to double your web leads this year. There's some new strategies and really new twists on old strategies, if you will, that are really, really working for folks in the PHC community out there right now. And we want to make sure that you know about them. So if you're on the presentation, some of the stuff we're going to go through will almost sound like a total duh, but some of it might sound really complicated. So this is a great presentation, great webinar for you to ask as many questions as possible. We've staffed up appropriately here. We got 4 of us in the conference room here, our little makeshift studio, if you will, and we are ready to answer your questions. As you know, our feeling here is that this is about education, so we want to make sure you get your questions answered. If the question that you ask is off topic a little bit or a little too esoteric, then what we're going to do is we're going to ask to just handle that offline with you. But one thing's for sure, at the end of the presentation I will encourage this as well, but I really want to make sure you take advantage of the fact that PHCC has organized for you a free consulting time with any of us at our shop here at Market Hardware. And what that means is you can get a no pressure, no hassle, just educational information session with one of our consultants on the topic of your choice. That comes to you free once a year. You're more than welcome to contact us. We want you to contact us after the webinar with your questions, maybe schedule that consultation and whatnot, but we just want to make sure you get the most out of it. My name is Kraff. You've probably heard my voice before, but for some of the newcomers to the call, myself and Alon and Doug and Allie, who recently joined us, but the 3 of us, Brian, Alon, and Doug, we've been doing these presentations for close to 10 years at this point for the association and specifically for the Educational Foundation. What we love is the fact that the web marketing world changes every 6 months. I mean, if not every month, right? Because Google and Facebook are changing all the time. Strategies are changing all the time. Certain things get more expensive or tougher to become the best at. A great example is paid search is just getting so exhaustively expensive right now. It's almost prohibitive in some major markets. On the other hand, SEO continues to be an area where people are really making good money. Reviews remain incredibly important. Having a responsive website remains an absolute must for this upcoming year, not only for your SEO, but also just for all the mobile viewers out there. So there's always something changing. And the bottom line to that, and you've heard me say this before if you've been on one of our webinars or seen us in person, the bottom line is that is your opportunity to take advantage of tech trends, of web trends, and get to a place where you are dominating your local competition using these strategies. And we've had small firms, 2, 3, 4 truck firms, really beat the pants off of some much larger entities just because they were able to do some really smart web marketing. So I'm excited to talk about this. And what that means today is we're going to talk about ways that you can really increase retention, get your existing customers to buy more from you, but also to actually double the amount of people that come to your web, or more specifically, double the number of visitors that come to your web, your website, and we'll talk about that. Of course, the website is the central piece of your web marketing platform, and whether you're doing search, you're doing social media, you're writing an email newsletter, you're doing offline campaigns, all that stuff should be driving people to the website, because really the website's the center. Even word of mouth, as you guys know. Word of mouth, someone's referring your firm to one of their friends. They're not going to give you the phone number or even the URL. They're just say, hey, go Google Safeway Plumbing, and you'll find them, right? So I think it's really key that just to remind everybody that even word of mouth passes through Google, Facebook, and your website. So with that, what I want to do is move us on and really talk about email marketing, why we think it's so important, and talk about banner ad retargeting. Now, banner ads have been out there for a long, long time. We've seen them on portals like, like Yahoo used to be, 10, 15 years ago. We see them everywhere, right? But what's different now is that banner ads and the ability to target banner ads to very specific audiences. That could be by zip code. It could be by demographics. You want single-family homeowners in a particular zip code that have a certain amount of income, and that's a slam dunk recurring customer for you. Now we're at a place, the technology world is at a place where we could put banner ads in front of those people specifically. And that's an amazing thing, because all of a sudden you've got a billboard right in front of somebody. And so let's say that they're waking up in the morning and they just always go to weather.com on their app to see what the weather's going to be like. Boom, the first thing they see could be an ad from you because they're in a zip code that you want to serve. So there's amazing targeting potential here. And it's a way to find new customers, which we'll talk about, using search retargeting, but it's also a way to get people that visit your site to come back to your site time and time again, and that is site retargeting. And those are those ads that follow you around the web. You've probably seen this if you've tried to buy a product on Amazon, and all of a sudden it follows you over to CNN, and the ad follows you over to MLB TV, and so on and so forth. So we're going to show you how to take this big company strategy and make it work for your company for essentially pennies. But before that, we're going to talk about email marketing. And email marketing is so important because it does not cost a lot, it is easy to do, and it's a great way to stay in touch with both your customers and your prospects. Everybody on this call should be doing some form of email marketing and should at least consider some form of banner targeting this year. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Alon, who's going to take over. Alon, give some specifics, and let's get the show on the road.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Wayne. We're really excited to be doing this presentation. We really value our partnership with PHCC. We've been fortunate enough to actually speak at past Connect conferences, and we do a couple webinars a year, and we write a handful of articles for PHCC and their members. And I think that I speak for all of us when I say that we're excited to be doing this presentation because we've seen this stuff work really well for the plumbing, heating, and cooling contractors that are members of PHCC. We want to just point out a couple things here, showing why we were selected to do this presentation, which is that we've worked with PHC contractors for over 10 years, and we've been in business for 13 years. Our team is fortunate enough to get some insider information from some of the top search experts who tell us about the right and wrong way to do a lot of these strategies, and that's sort of one of the keys that we talk about in terms of email marketing and retargeting and banner ads and even SEO like we've done in the past. There's a lot of different ways to go about doing those, and our goal is to help educate all of the folks on the line and all PHCC members about the right ways to go about doing those different strategies, whichever one might be most appropriate for your business. And we talk about this a lot, that when it comes to web, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What might work for you might be completely different than your neighbor or even the competitor across the street. Just given the nature of your business, whether you focus more on repair versus installation, whatever the case might be, it's really important to speak to somebody that can help you figure out what might work best for you. So that's kind of what drives our point home. And we get asked the question really often about how can I get my phone to ring more often? And we're sitting here practically all day wondering the same thing. We're in the same boat as a lot of you all on the call. We want our phones to ring more often. That means more leads, that means more business and more profits. So what this question ends up leading us down the path of is three really big topics. And we've talked about the bottom one, the one in green, for really the last year or two, which is SEO and PPC. And with PPC, we've been talking about that for several years now. And those are two really great strategies. We're still firm believers in SEO and PPC, getting new client calls. But what's happened is the marketplace for those has become really saturated. And there's only so much opportunity, so much real estate on page one. So it's almost become too competitive and too difficult. It's still possible to show up, very possible to show up, but what we want to be talking about today is some more outside-the-box strategies like email newsletter marketing and banner retargeting, like Brian had alluded to. And those are the strategies where if you get on board with them and your competitors haven't done that already, these are the ones that are really going to set you apart. So we have a fun presentation today because we're talking about some of these outside-the-box strategies. Brian mentioned For example, putting ads on the Weather Channel, which can be a really great way to sort of get a little creative in your marketing and show some ads when it's really hot or really cold out. So we'll talk about that later on. And I'm excited to have you all on the call so we can jump into that. So let's get started with email newsletter marketing. When it comes to email newsletter marketing, like I said earlier, there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it, but before we give you examples of that, Doug's going to give us an overview of what email newsletter marketing actually is. So Doug, tell us, what is the process of sending out an email newsletter campaign?
Thanks, Lon. And I'm sure a lot of folks on this call today have either personally run or had an employee run an email newsletter campaign before. But first and foremost, folks, this starts with a list of your existing clients. When it comes to email marketing, we're really big fans of working with your existing clients, more so than acquiring a list of prospects per se. We find that when you're using your existing client base, of course, you already have built up that trust, that rapport, and you're going to get more out of that specific list of names. So first and foremost, if you've been saving them up over years, that's terrific. If you haven't saved up a list of your clients' emails, it's never too late to start. But literally, folks, make sure that your staff is starting to acquire your clients' emails today, because the sooner you do that, the sooner that you can start to upsell your clients even more. Once you've got your list of names, and this can be anything from 100 up to 10,000. We've heard of everything in between. You've got to find the right email marketing platform. So when we say platform, we usually mean the program with which you're going to run your email marketing campaign. The most common one folks are familiar with is probably Constant Contact, but there's lots of other ones out there. Depending on what you're looking to accomplish, the way that you have your emails organized, how many emails you're working with, and the type of customization you're looking for, there's really a lot of different platforms out there. And so there's also the do-it-yourself tools like Constant Contact versus the do-it-for-me tools that other companies or agencies use. So make sure that you've got a platform that you're comfortable with. Of course, now we get into the meat of it, which is adding content and what goes into that content. I have a lot of conversations with PHC contractors who are looking to get more out of their clients. Maybe they sold them a boiler 10 years ago and it's time to do some specific maintenance or possibly replace one that was sold even before then. The content that goes into the emails is as important as anything, and we're big believers specifically in how you balance educational content versus promotional content. And I'm going to let Alon talk a little bit about that here because he's our in-house marketing expert, but we've got what we call the 90-10 rule. So Alon, will you tell everybody about that real quickly?
Yeah, so this is a concept that we've talked about a lot with social media in the past, which is when you're trying to figure out your content for social media and for email newsletters, you want 90% of that content to be educational. And I'm going to give you some examples of something that is far too promotional and what happens to that in the slide, but it's really important to make sure that the majority of the content that you send out or that you post on social media is educational. There's a time and a place for more promotional content, but when it comes to an email newsletter, that's certainly not the place to do it. You want to use that as an opportunity to position yourself as an expert, build some credibility, and obviously you do want to save a portion of your email newsletter and a portion of your social media posts for that 10% promotional content, but it's really important to stay in line with that 90-10 rule.
Thanks, Alon. We know that's a big component of what we do here and what we try to tell our clients to do. So now that we've talked about the first steps, getting your names, finding the right platform, making sure that you have the right balance of content, the key here, folks, is what so many companies struggle with, which is the consistency that you really have to work with. You don't want to reuse content per se, but what you want to do is stick to a schedule. And making sure that you do that in a way where you're consistently communicating with your clients is essential, because if you're just sending out one, every few months or once a year, or not really sticking to either a monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly newsletter, it's really hard to kind of establish the rhythm that you need to be successful. So make sure that you're doing it on a regular basis to stay in front of your clients.
And that sort of segues nicely into the next slide, which is what is an email newsletter marketing? And this sometimes is the best way to clarify what we're talking about when it comes to email newsletter marketing, because as soon as that topic comes up, everybody sort of has a red flag go up, which is, I don't want to be the type of company that sends out a ton of emails practically every single day or every single week, which is full of discounts and offers and exclamation marks and inappropriate content like magical drug or diet pills. We're not talking about doing any combination of any of that. When it comes to email newsletter marketing, we're talking about, like I mentioned, educational content that's going to position you as an expert and that's going to keep you in front of your customers or even some of your existing prospects. If you have a list of prospects that you've gone out and you've done estimates for and they decided not to move forward, you can send them an email campaign that's, again, very educational, that just reminds them that you're there. That might be the trigger that sort of sets off in the prospect's head, and then they decide to actually end up calling you and bring you in. One of the concepts that we're going to be talking about throughout the presentation today is casting a wider net, and that means keeping your customers coming back time and time again and getting some of those prospects that maybe started down the sales funnel but didn't make it all the way to the end where they actually made a buying decision to work with your company. So these are all strategies we're going to be talking about today. I want to point out a couple of examples here before we move forward, because this is what happens when you send out an email, especially with a subject line that has things like dollar signs or expiration dates and things like special deals or words in capital letters like the bottom right example. When you send out emails with subject lines like that, they're very likely to be set off as spam filters, and they're just going to go right into a junk folder. So one of the metrics that you want to put into place if you're doing an email newsletter marketing campaign is open rates. You want to make sure as many of your emails are being opened as possible, and Doug's going to talk about the trackability of emails in a minute, but it's really important to get that right, because if you're sending out an email newsletter and 2, 3, 5% of the emails are being opened and that's it, then there's a good chance that a lot of those emails are overly promotional and they're just going to junk folders, or your customers and prospects are just tagging them as spam. So definitely make sure that if you're going to try to do this on your own, that you take that into account so that you get a good subject line that's not going to rub people the wrong way and that's going to make it into customers' inboxes as opposed to their junk folders. So Doug, I mentioned trackability. It's one of the many reasons why email newsletter marketing is such a popular tool. So tell us a little bit specifically about trackability, but also the other 3 reasons why email newsletter marketing is such a popular tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that everybody on this call, or really any contractor out there, thinks about when it comes to any form of marketing that they're getting into is, first and foremost, how much are we talking about here? We get this is usually the first question that we get, and for good reason. When we're talking about marketing dollars, you have to know what the return on investment is going to be, or at least get a general idea of what that return is going to be. The great thing about email marketing is you can have 2 approaches, and both of them are highly, highly affordable. First, you have the do-it-yourself option, and again, folks, make sure that if you're doing that, you're doing it consistently. But if you have the time to do it or have somebody in-house with the knowledge to do it, you can use in-house programs for $100 a month or even less, depending on how customized you want that to be. Let's say you make 1 sale for every email that goes out, or even more than that. You're certainly going to see a return on investment come from that. And again, the size of your email list that you're working with has a lot to do with that. But for a lot of folks on this call, I'm sure the second option, the do-it-for-me solution, is going to be a better fit because you're busy running your business. You don't have time to write monthly or bi-monthly emails to your clients. And if that's the case, you're usually looking at just a couple $100. These days, running an ad campaign on Google through AdWords, pay-per-click, the same thing, of course, is usually going to cost thousands of dollars. So if you're working with existing clients that you've already acquired, and you're able to send them a monthly email and upsell them on that for just a couple $100, it's really a cost-effective form of marketing. As Alon was talking about, the ability to track these emails is something that's very unique because with direct mail, you certainly can use offer codes and things like that to get a little bit better understanding of what return you're getting. But with email, you can see who opened it, the links that people clicked on, how particular clients are interacting with particular emails. And when you learn more about how people interact with or respond to your emails, you can learn more about how to market to them in the future. So that's a huge part of what makes email marketing so attractive. this is probably my favorite part of it. The speed with which you can get an email out is very unique in the marketing world, and there's really nothing else like it. Direct mail campaigns, which we're still big believers in, depending on, of course, the quality of your list, takes real time to put together. But an email is something that you can prepare based on, you could do it in a day. So if you're about to have a major weather event, maybe you're going to get a huge cold spell in the winter, or it's about to be a huge heat wave that's going to lead to a lot of AC business for you. Whatever it may be, you can adjust and send an email out within just 24 hours or less to the right people at the right time. And the speed with which you can prepare something like that is very unique. And it's something that we really encourage our clients to take advantage of when they have the opportunity to do so. And last but certainly not least is the personalization. Studies actually show that when you include the first name of the recipient of a particular email in the subject line of that email, they are much, much more likely to open it. So that's just one example, but there's other ways that you can personalize your emails. Maybe a handful of clients are in particular buckets based on the products that they've purchased and the years that they've worked with you. If that's the case, you can tailor emails and the products that you promote in those emails specifically to clients based on that. It says a lot to your clients when you're paying attention to the products or services they bought before. And when you do that effectively, you really maximize your potential to see a return on your investment.
All right, so now we get to go to one of my favorite slides on the presentation, and I say that because this is a slide that whether you decide you want to do it yourself when it comes to email marketing, or you want to have somebody in the office do it, or you want to hire an actual company to do it for you, this is what's going to make you more knowledgeable about email newsletter marketing. So whatever strategy you decide to employ, these are the topics and sections that you want to have be part of your email newsletter, which is a personal greeting. This is, like Doug said, the opportunity to put a personal touch, to introduce yourself, to put a face to your business so that your customers and prospects know who they're working with. Go from that into some do-it-yourself industry tips. This is where you position yourself as an expert. So telling your customers and prospects how to fix leaky pipes on their own, or how to do basic home efficiency tips to keep the heat or cold air inside, depending on what season it is. These are tips that, frankly, chances are a lot of your customers and prospects, they're going to get them. Maybe they'll use some of the tips. More often than not, they're not actually going to do this stuff on their own. But either way, inevitably, something's going to go wrong in their home, and they're going to need to call an expert. And sure enough, at that point, chances are they're going to give you a call before anybody else, because they've been getting your email newsletters. They trust your credibility. They've gotten those tips from you. They don't feel like they're having sales shoved down their throat all the time. So take advantage of this section, regardless of whatever strategy, whether it's a DIY or hiring out. You want this section. It's potentially the most important section of an email newsletter. Some other ones that we like to include are things like industry news, policy changes at your company, any other staff introductions, so that you can show, maybe you guys hired some new technicians or you promoted somebody. Again, it's another great opportunity to put faces to your business, and it's funny how in line email newsletter marketing is with our social media products that we've talked about in the past, because we've always said any opportunity you can get to put pictures of your staff or your employees or your facilities, your vans, stuff like that, you want to take advantage of those opportunities, because people like working with people that they know and trust. So that's your opportunity to do that. Seasonal updates is especially important for all the folks on the line that do HVAC on top of plumbing. You want to make sure to do seasonal updates about heating and air conditioning changes, and reminders to furnace or to repair furnaces or boilers, whatever it might be. You want to take that opportunity to be sure to include that in your email newsletter. And then, of course, the 10% promotional part, here we have that highlighted in the bottom right. So the last paragraph, you want that to be a seasonal offer, a seasonal reminder for maintenance, installation, whatever the promotion you're running at that time. The last 10% of your email newsletter is your opportunity to do that. So let's take a look at an example, because we get questions about this a lot. And one of our philosophies on email newsletter marketing is that less is more. One of the challenges when it comes to email marketing is having an email that does show up really well in all the different email engines out there. And of course, there's certain email engines that come up on phones, some that come up on tablets, some that come up on desktops. You have Gmail, you have Outlook, and the list goes on and on and on. And every one of those displays emails slightly differently. So it's really hard if you have a lot of graphics in your email, to make sure that it shows up really nicely and appropriately on all of those. So the easiest way to go about doing that is to scale back. Have one image, your logo, just to put a little bit of branding on your email newsletter, and that's it. Because as you start to have too many images, it's hard to have an email that's easy to read. And if your email isn't easy to read, then obviously that's going to get people to just delete it or move it aside and ignore it most of the time. So you want your customers and prospects to have no issues at all reading your email. We have highlighted here the educational content, talking about the 90-10 rule with the list of 3 to 5 bulleted items, like some DIY industry tips. Again, just emphasizing the importance of this, because this is where you're going to establish your credibility. You're going to show that you're an expert in the industry, and the more messages like this that your customers and prospects see, whether it's an email newsletter or social media, this is the stuff that's going to really set you apart. And the good news is PHCC members are typically among the best in the business. All of you on the line are experts. You're credible. You're reputable. You're PHCC members. So you shouldn't have many problems coming up with this content, but if you need a little bit of help, you can always check PHCC's database online, because they have a lot of those tips available. So if you're ever struggling to come up with content, use the resources that are available to you, whether it's on the PHCC member portal or it's even contacting us. We have some PHCC members who contact us from time to time and say, hey, I'm struggling to come up with content. Can you give me some tips or some advice on the best way to do this stuff? And we're happy to help with that. So at this point, we typically get a lot of questions about, how reasonable is it to do email newsletter marketing on your own? And there's really 4 main challenges that come up with considering that. So, Doug, you field that question as much as anybody here in the office. So I'm going to turn it over to you for this slide. So talk through some of the challenges that come up with do-it-yourself email marketing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and we'll try to keep this slide pretty simple, folks, because it really comes down to the fact that if you can't answer yes to all of these questions, you're probably going to have to find somebody to help you out. Now, to be clear, you could find somebody in-house who can do that, but we really don't recommend handing this off to somebody in-house unless they have direct experience running these campaigns before or have been trained in how to do so, because it's not the type of thing that you want to learn on the fly. But first and foremost, as we talked about before, being able to come up with new content is essential to capturing your audience. If you're just copying and pasting old emails into new emails, you're going to lose your client, and frankly, they're probably going to wonder if you sent it by mistake, if a second one comes with content that came from before. So making sure that you have the time to do that without spending too much time on it is huge. As we talked about before, we don't need to beat this with the beat the dead horse here, but making sure that you balance the educational and promotional side. If you're making it too promotional, you're going to feel your audience is going to end up opting out of your emails. If you're making it too educational or having too much content, the email is going to drag on and they're not even going to get to the offer. So make sure that you've got the 90-10 balance that we were talking about. Number 3 bullet point is really where most folks that we talk to run into the biggest issues. Do you have the time and the patience to write, edit, and proofread, and also test send these emails? Writing and editing and proofreading is one point. Test sending them often points out a lot of small things that you may not even notice when you're creating the emails. So this is where having professionals usually comes in to have the most important effect for you, because most folks I know that are running PHC businesses don't have time to do all this, and that's okay. That's what professionals are there for. And making sure that you understand how to fit that into an HTML design. Some of you may not be familiar with what we mean by HTML. That's okay. That's just an indication that this is something that you may want to outsource. Alon and I are not professionals in how to change the sink in our house if we had to, or how to repair a boiler. So these are things where we find professionals that can help us, and if it's somebody local, somebody in-house, or just somebody you trust, you need to find somebody professional to help you out as well.
And look, here's the takeaway on email marketing, right? And we're going to get to banner ads on the next slide, and I'm excited about that part. But before we get to that, I want to point out this stat, which is that 74% of consumers prefer to receive email marketing messages than any other form of communication. So that might be, if anybody's doing any sort of outbound phone marketing or direct mail marketing or going door to door, knocking on people's homes and saying, do you need this or that fixed? When it comes down to it, your consumers and your prospects want to receive email newsletter or email marketing messages before anything else, because it puts the power in their hands. It makes it easy for them to say, okay, I want to read this, I don't want to read this, I want to save this for later, I want to unsubscribe. And the key is going about your email marketing the right way so that they do read it or they do save it for later and they're not just unsubscribing and marking it spam. We all are faced with that every single day. It feels like half the messages that I get are spam, but it's easy to separate yourself from that when you do put, like we've said, educational, informational content into an email newsletter, because that's the kind of stuff that doesn't get marked as spam. You know, maybe it doesn't get read every single time, but it'll at least get set aside, saved for later, and then when it comes to it, you're still getting your name out in the people that really matter. So now we're going to talk a little bit about banner ads, and like we've mentioned, this is a really cool strategy that's grown a lot since the beginning of the year. What we've seen happen with banner ads is it's sort of transformed into a couple different things, which we'll talk about over the next handful of slides. We're about halfway through the presentation, so we're right on time. I want to remind everybody to please send questions. If any part of email newsletter marketing stumped you, don't feel bad sending a long question. We're more than happy to address it. And if any of the next couple of slides stump you, then again, don't be ashamed to shoot us a question, and we'll be sure to answer it either during the presentation or even afterwards if we need to. So when we're talking about banner ads, there's a big issue that we've run into with websites, which we've talked about for years, which is that a lot of customers will go and visit your website, they'll click through a few pages, learn about your business, but they might not necessarily be ready to call you right away. So it presents a challenge which a lot of businesses are faced with, which is how to recapture that traffic, how to get that prospect that maybe made it halfway down the sales process but not all the way down. How do you get them to come back? So we're going to try to solve for that with the good news is affordable banner ads, and Doug's going to tell us a little bit more about that. But we have another stat here from ComScore, which is that audiences exposed to banner ads actually end up being more engaged with advertisers' sites. It's almost like the second or third time they come back to a website, they end up more engaged. They're much more likely to actually call that business, and your chances of converting that interested prospect into a customer can shoot up astronomically. So what we're talking about in terms of banner ads are three big different strategies, which are similar, but there's pros and cons to each, which we're going to be talking about. So the first one, which Doug's going to talk about in a second, is site search retargeting, which are sort of intertwined but pretty unique from one another. And then separate from that, some of you may have tried Facebook ads in the past, and this is a strategy that's changed a lot. 2-3 years ago, we weren't necessarily pointing people in this direction, but it seems to be getting better and better. Facebook is doing a very good job of making those ads highly targeted, which is important when we're marketing. And then last but not least, Doug's also going to tell us about weather channel advertisements. So it's we have, underneath that in parentheses, that's right, because I'm sure that there's people on the line who are surprised to see weather channel as a type of banner ads, but that's correct. The weather channel is actually getting in the mix when it comes to banner advertising and pay-per-click. So we're going to show you how to do that, and we're going to show you some of the ways that can be a unique way to go about doing some online marketing. So Doug, let's get into that site versus search retargeting. So what are we talking about? How are those different? How do they work together in unison? And just give us an overview of those two.
Sure. So we've been talking a lot about, or we've been using the term retargeting a lot, but I'm sure a lot of folks are raising their eyebrow, and that's okay. Essentially, what retargeting is, we've all experienced it before if we use the web. Let's say you're at home or you're at the office and you need to go buy a new toolkit or some supplies for the office, and you go to Amazon.com or Lowe's or Home Depot, any of these major websites. It could be another website where you're buying retail products as well. If you don't buy that product at that time and you happen to leave the site, you may notice if you go to any other website, CNN.com, ESPN.com, maybe your local media station website, the banner advertisement, an image of the advertisement follows you around with the product that you were just looking at on Amazon, Lowe's, or Home Depot. And you've probably wondered, how does the internet know that I was just looking at that? How is it possible that they knew that I was just looking at this particular product. Well, that's called site retargeting. You visit a particular website. You can do this for a lot of restaurants. Do this as well, folks. If you go to Ruth's Chris or some steakhouse, you may notice that that advertisement will follow you around for days or weeks after as you continue to surf the web. Basically what happens from a technical standpoint is a pixel is installed on a website, and we can do this, what we're getting at is for small businesses as well, but a pixel is installed on a website, or a cookie is what it's called, and when somebody visits a site, your browser takes note that you visited that website. The ad can then be displayed to you on what's called an ad network thereafter, which is a massive collection of some of the most visited websites on the internet. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. So you're interested in a product or a service, you visit that company's website, their ad can continue to follow you around on the web when you visit hundreds or thousands of websites thereafter. But what if somebody doesn't visit your website and you need to get in front of them as well? Maybe they're even looking at a competitor site. If they go to Google and any search engine and search for a particular product, this is called search retargeting. This is actually an even more effective, in some cases, acquisition tool, because you're getting yourself in front of people who may not have even known that you offer the service in their particular town or city. Maybe they were looking for a competitor, and your banner advertisement follows them around as they continue to surf the web. So just to be very clear here, site retargeting is for people who visit your website, and then their advertisement follows them around thereafter because we know for a fact that they were interested in your service. Search retargeting helps you get in front of people who may not have known or visited your website, but you know for a fact that they're interested in the service you're providing. So this is a very unique balance between both types of advertising.
And Doug, I want to jump in for a second here before we get to the next slide, because one of the things that I like to emphasize with search retargeting that makes it pretty unique, and it's sort of similar, one of the things that we used to talk about with SEO, is that you can be strategic about which search phrases you target and go after. And what that means is if you're more interested in growing your installation side of your business, more so than service and repair, then you can focus on those search terms. You have some say in this. You don't have to go after every single plumbing search term out there, every single heating and AC term out there. Just like we talked about with SEO, when it's really cold out, then you want to be primarily focused on heating terms, and vice versa. When it's really hot out in the middle of the summer, you want to be going after the AC terms because those are the ones getting traffic. So if you're going to hire somebody to do some retargeting for you, and Doug, I'm going to ask you in a slide or two how much it might cost to do retargeting. But if you're going to hire somebody to do this stuff for you, you want to make sure that they are being selective, that they are being strategic about the terms that they go after. Make sure you're communicating to them which side of your business. Maybe it's, you want to grow the plumbing side more so than the HVAC side, or vice versa. Make sure you're having that conversation with your web marketing provider so they're taking that into account when trying to decide which or how many of those keywords to show up for. So let me give it back to you, Doug. Tell us a little bit about budgeting when it comes to retargeting, and then on the next slide, tell us about where the ads are going to be shown.
So when it comes to retargeting, folks, and to be clear, while we're talking about site and search retargeting as two separate things that happen, they are both part of the same campaign. So if you're running a campaign, what you typically do is split your budget in a way that fits your market and the number of site visitors you have between both site and search. So you're getting in front of audiences who are coming to your site and people who are searching for your services. But when we're talking about costs associated with this, this is one of the greatest things about display, banner, all this great stuff about retargeting. It's very inexpensive. Depending on the ad or the publisher network that you're working with, and we're going to show the kind of reach that you can have here on this slide, but depending on the company that you're working with to run this, because this really is the type of product, folks, that you need to work with professionals on. The technology is advancing rapidly, but different companies work through different ad networks, and essentially the most effective ones allow you to reach 80 to 90% of the audience in North America, or America more specifically, because you're hitting the biggest websites that are the most visited on the web. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this. You're on, again, Amazon or Home Depot or Lowe's, and these products will follow you around all over the place. And so usually what we recommend as a company is a budget that fits obviously within the other types of advertising that you have, but for folks here in Market Hardware, really anybody out there, usually you want to start at the $500 to $1,000 a month level. However, the great thing is that you're usually getting about 1 to 2 cents per impression. That means it costs you about a cent or two for every single time that your banner advertisement is shown. Think about how cheap and ineffective that can be over time. That means for your $500 or $1,000, you're getting somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 impressions. And just to be very clear, so we're not using buzzwords here, impressions simply means that your ad is shown to somebody. Okay? Now, you're trying to generate as much traffic as you can to the website by doing this, of course, but the main goal here is getting yourself in front of as many people as possible and building up that brand recognition in a unique way. And when you're doing that with the right provider who has the right ad network to go through, you're hitting the top news site, entertainment site, lifestyle sites, even social media. This can include Facebook, it can include Google-based websites, your local media station. I mean, folks, really, you can visit just about any website on the internet, and they're going to be part of one of these major content networks. So that's the biggest thing that you want to keep in mind.
All right, so I'm going to show a couple examples of these ads, and I'm going to give Doug an opportunity to look at some of the questions that we've gotten so far so he can answer those in a minute. But I want to point out a few examples because there's a few different ads that you can do. So here we have a business painting by Mark Caruso, and we have on the left side the Kohl's website, and on the right side we have MLB.com's website showing up. So you can see that these ads are showing up here on the left-hand side of the Kohl's website, the right-hand side of MLB.com website. These are websites that are getting a ton of traffic, and you can, like Doug said, you can put a banner ad on these for as little as a few cents every time that it's shown. And I mean, putting, you know, our marketing math hats on for a minute, if you're getting, you know, a couple dozen impressions for as little as $1, and then you start to multiply that out, and suddenly you're getting tens or hundreds of impressions for just a couple bucks, you really only need one of those viewers to click through the ad and call you for this service to pay for itself several times over. Let's jump ahead a slide and look at some more examples. So it doesn't just have to be those rectangular banner ads. Here we have Barrett & Sons, a landscaping company. On the left-hand side, we have a square banner. And then on the right-hand side, we have another rectangular banner, but this one's horizontal across the top of the screen. So going back to what we talked about, when it comes to retargeting, if you're hiring somebody to help you out with this, make sure that they can design different variations of ads, because that's going to be one of the ways to maximize your reach on the internet. There's a lot of websites out there that will only show 1 or 2 different types of ads. So you have to figure out a company that can design those different ads for different websites so that your network is as big as possible, so that you do cast a wide net as possible. These 2 examples on here are local newspaper sites, but again, these are sites that are getting a fair amount of traffic, and if you have these in your local service area, then you can get a lot of exposure and a lot of brand recognition just by putting these retargeting ads out there. It looks like we got a question from Tim, who had a question about the right way to go about buying an email list. Doug, I know this is a question that you've gotten before, and it certainly presents one of the challenges when it comes to email newsletter marketing. So before we jump ahead to Facebook ads, do you mind just answering this question for Tim? I'm sure that there's other callers on the line that are wondering, should I buy an email list? Should I use an existing email list? What's the best way to go and have a list of names that you can send an email newsletter marketing campaign to?
So, and thank you for the question. I think it's a good one, Tim. This is a really sensitive particular topic because the quality of the email list that you purchase, just like a direct mail list, is very much going to be based on the company that you're buying it from. Many of you may have heard from or have been marketed to by InfoUSA, who's probably the leading provider of data out there, whether it's direct mail or email. These lists are very hit or miss. Essentially, you know, if we're really talking about buying an email list, I think what you're trying to find in advance is how targeted you can make that list, meaning like many other data acquisition tools, you're buying it based off of demographics. You're trying to go after particular homeowners that live in particular towns or cities or zip codes that are in a market segment where the household income is over a certain amount, so you're targeting to the most affluent so you can make the biggest profits. But Where you purchase those lists is really up to you. I think, in my opinion, the best way to go about doing that is to find somebody who in your industry has done that before, and a company that they've purchased it from where they found that the emails were successful. Because this is not the kind of thing where you're going to get a refund if you're not happy with the list, because the company that sells the data may just say you didn't market to them appropriately. So look for other folks who you trust in your industry who have acquired email lists before. Ask them where they got that and how successful it was, because at the end of the day, prospect marketing and email is really tough. We want to hammer that home. It is very difficult. Most of these prospects are getting dozens of promotional emails every day, which is why we're really talking more about today how you market to your existing client base. But I hope that helped answer your question a little bit, Tim. Asking friends and other folks in the industry who you've worked with where they got email prospect lists is a good place to start. But if you want to talk more about that, please give us a call after the presentation. I want to make sure we stay on schedule here. Thanks again.
All right, so we're going to jump back into Facebook and how they're involved with banner ads and retargeting. And one of the cool ways that Facebook does this is sort of similar to what Doug was saying before. You can install a pixel on your website and actually track all your website visitors, and Facebook does this automatically for you. You don't have to sit and do this. But you can actually design a banner ad that will show on Facebook to anybody that's visited your website. And ideally what happens is they actually click on the website and then click on the ad and then end up back on your website. So it's a form of retargeting that focuses specifically on Facebook, and I'm going to show you why that's important in a couple slides. But this is a really good way. If you're active on Facebook, this is a great way to sort of bring your social media and your web marketing together, because you can drive some more of that traffic back to your website. Facebook lets you do a lot of cool things. If you don't want to drive that traffic to your website, you can actually use this to solicit email addresses, and you can have people register for an email newsletter. So if you're looking to build out an email list so that you can start sending out an email newsletter, you can actually build that into your Facebook banner ad. There's a lot of different opportunities and strategies that you can employ as a sort of side effect of all this. And there's a lot more that we can even do as we start to dive a little bit deeper into Facebook. You can actually get really strategic. So when Facebook started doing ads a couple years ago, you weren't able to do all this, but nowadays you can set up a Facebook ad. You can get down into the nitty-gritty and really focus on specific zip codes. So if you have affluent areas where you know there's a lot of single homeowners or single house families versus apartment buildings, and you can target the zip codes that you want to go after, where you know that there's more expensive plumbing and HVAC jobs available, and you can go after those. You can even target incomes, and like I said, homeowners. You can target specific interests. So you'd be surprised how much information is available to Facebook that they have about anybody on Facebook that's actually demonstrated an interest in home improvement, for example. You can go after those. So here we have an example of a campaign where a company was going after some of that, and they've actually been able to get quite a large reach, and that's the impressions that we've been talking about. 40,670 impressions and 1,100 results for a pretty reasonable budget. So if this is something that did set off a light bulb in your head and you're interested in doing this, definitely consider it. But there's a lot that goes into it, with as much of a positive as it is being able to laser target a campaign like this. Unfortunately, that does mean that there's ways that it can go wrong, and it goes back to our point early on in the presentation, which is that there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this, and we want to try to help you figure out the right way to do this. The more laser targeted your marketing can get, the less you'll be spending and the better off you're going to be as a result of it. So one last thing on Facebook ads before we jump to the weather channel, which I'm sure people are excited to hear about. ComScore, which is one of the biggest data collection agencies out there, has said that 1 out of every 7 minutes online is spent on Facebook. So this is why having a banner ad on Facebook can be so effective. And some of the retargeting campaigns that we run and other businesses out there run, they include Facebook in their entire network of sites. But if you want to just stick to one banner ad location, then maybe Facebook is right for you, because this stat shows how much time is spent on Facebook. You can laser target that campaign. You can try to drive website clicks. You can try to drive folks to sign up to your email newsletter. There's a lot of fun stuff that we can do with that. So take this into account, and if you have questions about this, be sure to let us know. So Doug, let's get to the weather channel, because this is the one I've been kind of getting a little overexcited to get to this slide. So tell us a little bit about the weather channel. How are they getting in the mix when it comes to banner ads?
Okay, so folks, anytime that and bear with us because we've got about 10 minutes left, but this is a really important thing to talk about here. Fortunately, here at Market Hardware, we actually have a relationship with the folks at the Weather Channel, which makes us unique in the marketplace. But let's say you have a smartphone and you download apps. I'm sure many of you have done this, whether it's a map, a driving app, or maybe a local food app, whatever it may be. 80 or 90% of the time, that application on your phone, of course, will ask you at the end of the download whether you want to share your location with them. 80 to 90%, and the studies show this, of people opt out, meaning they do not want to share their address. However, with the Weather Channel, you need to share your address in order to get the correct weather. I mean, this is obvious and it goes without saying, but the Weather Channel actually has the inverse. More than 80% of all people share their location. And what makes them unique is that other than Google, they have the most specific location-based service information of any app or company, really, in the country. They have almost 100 million downloads, I believe, and that gives them unique insight into how Americans both purchase things and how the weather can affect that. Okay, so we've learned a lot of people download the app. I'm sure many of you on this call have it, and we know that a lot of people share their location with that. Well, what does that mean for my business? I'm a PHC contractor, Doug. Well, what that means is that the Weather Channel actually runs ad campaigns, banner ads, as Alon was referring to before, on their website, on their tablet app, and on their smartphone app. And what makes them special in doing that is that not only can they target people very specifically down to a zip code, but they can do so even more effectively than what Google can do in AdWords, and that makes it very unique. You can target very specific zip codes around you. It doesn't have to be a radius, folks. It can be people to the west, people to the east, north, or south of you. However you want to target specific folks in your market and reach an audience of millions of people in your local market, if that's what you have, or even tens of thousands in a very targeted and specific way. But let's take it a step further. A lot of people have apps and a lot of people have ads popping up on their apps. Doug, what makes this special? Well, the fact that the Weather Channel, of course, is going to give people the weather means that not only can you display apps to folks, but you can do it in a way where you can actually target them based on upcoming weather events. Now, that's not the only way you want to target them. You, of course, want to display it to them regularly, but if you're about to get a heat wave in 72 hours and you have the opportunity to blast out as many AC-based banner advertisements on one of the most used applications in the country to a very specific target audience around you, that sounds pretty attractive to me, frankly. And being able to do so based on not just location, but weather events makes this a very special and very targeted form of marketing. So, it's a unique thing, and it's a very new form of advertising that they're rolling out, but it's something that's quite special when it comes to advertising today.
So here's sort of our wrap-up on banner ads. This is really the type of stuff that can take your existing web marketing strategy and make it 5%, make it 10% better. So, maybe you're doing SEO right now, maybe you're still doing paid search, maybe you're still doing other forms of website marketing or Yelp or whatever it might be. Taking your existing web strategy and layering on some aspect of one of these banner ad campaigns, whether it's a major network retargeting campaign, a smaller Facebook ad campaign, or trying to get some of those Weather Channel ads up when the heat's really high or there's suddenly a really cold spell and you want to remind people how to fix their furnaces so their houses are a little bit warmer when it's really cold out. Taking any one of those and layering it on top of your existing web marketing strategy is going to take that and make it that much better. This is how you're going to be the top business in your service area. You're going to be able to grow your business. We feel that these are the ways that you can double your web leads in 2016, and that's what we're hoping you take out of this presentation and use going forward. Some of these stats here just speak to that, and hopefully it's just more evidence of how much we do believe in banner ads and retargeting, because we've seen it work, and we are firm believers in that. But there is one last key component to it, which is figuring out the right web marketing company to do this. So again, there's a lot of companies out there. There's a lot of businesses out there that just do this stuff on their own. And I'm talking about plumbing, heating, and cooling businesses that do this stuff on their own, whether it's an entrepreneurial CEO, a marketing manager in-house. A lot of businesses out there are doing this stuff on their own. A lot of them are hiring somebody to do this for them. In fact, more than 80% of million-dollar small to medium-sized businesses are hiring somebody to do this web marketing for them. But it's important to figure out how to hire the right web marketing company. So Doug, in a minute or two, since we're running up against the end of the presentation, will you just tell us some of the right questions to ask when trying to hire the right web marketing company?
Yeah, and folks, as Alon mentioned, we'll keep this brief, and we will be sending out the presentation, but we pretty much consider this one of, if not the most important slide out here, because everybody on this call is getting cold called dozens of times a week, if not dozens of times a day. At the end of the day, most people, if not all, who are cold calling you, making you promises, guaranteeing things that just don't make sense, these are the ones you really need to be wary of. And in web marketing today, there are a lot more bad actors than there are good ones. And so this means you have to ask yourself a handful of questions before you sign up with anyone. First and foremost, is there a contract to sign? We understand that a lot of web marketing companies use contracts because they need time to be successful. However, there are a lot of companies out there, we're not going to name names, it's not about that, but if they're making you sign a contract and they are not delivering on it, especially if they're doing that on a year-over-year basis, you have to ask yourself, what am I paying for? Is this really a fit for me? And how is this helping my business? Because if you're signing up with a contract, folks, whether that company performs or not, you could be locked in for 12 months, even if they've delivered 2 months of poor performance and haven't lived up to expectations. So at the very least, make sure that they're setting very clear expectations about what you should be expecting to get from the program that they have. We're big believers here at Market Hardware in not going the contract route and making sure that if you are working with somebody long-term, you need to set appropriate expectations about when they should expect to be successful up front. Now, understanding the type of work that's going to be done on a monthly basis is huge, because we talk to a lot of PHC contractors who've been burned by other folks who used them in the past. For example, many folks who may have skyrocketed to page 1 of Google 3 or 4 years ago by working with a company, and then got punished by the Panda updates from Google, which dropped them from page 1 down to page 20. This came down to the wrong types of techniques being used for companies, and at the end of the day, it burned a lot of PHC contractors. So make sure you understand what your company is doing so it doesn't hurt you in the long term. Having industry familiarity may be the most underrated thing on here, because if a company, web marketing company, may build websites for restaurants or for car dealerships, but if they haven't worked with contractors, and specifically plumbing, heating, and cooling contractors, what are they doing, or how are they going to help you in a unique way? They need to understand the seasonality. They need to understand how to structure a website that's going to convert visitors into callers, and if they haven't done that for someone in your industry before, you're really risking your long-term success on someone who may not know what it takes. And last, and very briefly, staying up to date on web trends is a given, folks. If they are not staying up to date on web trends, your company is not somebody who you can trust to make sure that they're sharing important information with you when it comes out from Google.
All right, so we have about a minute left. I want to point out a quick benefit and then turn it over to Brian for some final thoughts, and then Wayne might have something to add on. So even though we've been talking about email newsletter marketing and banner ads today, we still are big believers in SEO, and what we want to have everybody on the call take advantage of is our website marketing evaluation, and what's included in that is still this SEO report. This was one of the benefits that we saw have major impacts at the PHCC Connect conference in Hollywood. We got a lot of good feedback about this because it'll actually show you where you show up for some of your top searches today. Whether you decide to take that and implement an SEO campaign, or maybe you want to do a search retargeting campaign, it's important to consider where you show up for some of those top searches right now, because those are the needle movers. Those are the ones that are going to get you more phone calls and more leads. So take advantage of this benefit, because we've seen it. This alone has had major impacts on plumbing, heating, and cooling businesses, just being able to know this information.